All right, welcome back to the Central Valley Buzz, everybody. I'm your host, Chuck Leonard. Willie, how you doing, buddy? All right. Hey, let's bring in Mike Bogart. Hey, how's it going?
Good,
right,
Chuck.
Nice to see you. Michael Bogart, 21st Century Faith. What do you want to talk about today?
Well, obviously, day after the election, and there have been all these dire threats from both sides of the equation that if the opposite candidate gets elected, there's going to be bad consequences, riots, or whatever.
I believe some stuff's going to go down.
Yeah, well, and may very well be, because this is one of those elections, and you and I've seen a number of elections in our lives. This one is one of those strategic elections where everybody went into it knowing that there was an awful lot more at stake this time. And so, people have called it the election of a generation and so on. And so I wanted to bring a little Christian perspective, at least what I think is Christian perspective to this whole outworking of the election.
Can I tell you that before we went into the polling place this morning, or we prayed before we went in just to make sure that we would make a good decision inside there.
Well, so that's what you should do, Chuck.
Well,
I mean, obviously, I think that's the right thing to do. I commend you for that.
I mean, our country needs it, man. We have a lot of things could go down if things just don't go right.
If people don't,
and I just know they're not.
Well, and the problem is, that even if there's a government in place that we don't like, or that a segment of the population doesn't like, the whole population needs to pull together to make the best of whatever situation exists after the election process is over. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the Bible. Obviously, the Bible does mention politics. It's not its main focus. But when it does mention politics, we have to remember that it's talking about a political situation that we don't really face. I mean, they didn't have representative democracy in the Bible. There was emperors and kings and Caesars and people like that. But what it does talk about with government, for example, Romans 13 in the New Testament, it talks about the role of government and citizens' reaction or citizens' relationship to it. Romans 13 says the role of government is to preserve order so that ordinary people can go about their business in peace. And that, at least the Christians that it was written to in Romans, should understand that the government has its proper role. Put that in perspective.
Politicians need to read that.
Well, yeah, I think so. And put that in perspective that the Roman government that Romans is referring to of the first century was pretty corrupt. I mean, the Caesars, think
Things
about
haven't changed much. Then.
Nero, Caligula, Claudius. Those guys were not good guys. And yet they still had to provide a basic government and keep law and order. Then you go back to the Old Testament, which is a much different situation. God's, supposedly God is supposed to be ruling through the prophets and the kings in the Old Testament. And not that they always did a good job representing God, but even there it says that righteousness exalts a nation. So it's not just the politicians that should be righteous, but the Bible's calling all the people to seek righteousness, which just means treating people right and acting right, so that God can exalt the nation. So I guess my message, Chuck, would be, let's pull together, let's work together, let's try to make the best out of the situation, whether we like the results or not, so that we can have a society where everybody can do as best as they possibly can.
Thank you very much, Michael Bogart, right there. Hey, you brought some books with you today. What do you got?
Well, since we're talking about the Bible, Chuck, I've got my latest book called the 45-minute Bible, which is, it's a short 100-page read. It's just an introduction to the Bible. It kind of explains the books and the sections and answers some familiar questions that people have.
Give me another question. Tell me one we haven't talked about. What's a question that people are asking frequently about the Bible?
Why should I take the Bible seriously? In other words, the core behind that question is, does the Bible really have any relevance to the 21st century? And I try to answer that one in here as well. Talk about that. Let's see, what else is another one? Let's see. Should the Bible be interpreted literally or figuratively?
Oh.
That's one that you always get. And so I answer all these questions in here. And for people in the who mainly speak Spanish, I just had this translated into Spanish just a month ago. In fact, I'm supposed to get the proof, the actual print proof back today, to make any minor corrections and so on. My Spanish isn't good enough to do it. I had to have somebody else do it. But there's really, if this is good in the English world, in the Spanish-speaking world, the Spanish translation of this book is one of the few books on the subject available in that language.
Nice.
So,
what about the other ones? You got a whole pile of books.
I do. My first one, of course, was Understanding Islam, written from a very fact-based, non-biased perspective on what Islam actually is. The same thing about Mormonism. The same thing about Jehovah's Witnesses. And I would never have guessed this, but my #1 seller on Amazon is this book.
No kidding.
Yep. I would have picked this to be last, but apparently it's not. And then I Know the New Age Movement, which is very confusing to a lot of people.
Wow.
So those are my
you
books.
can buy all those books separately, or can you buy them all as a package?
I have not put them into package form. That's a great idea, Chuck. Right now they're all available individually, but maybe I can make a package deal.
I like that right there.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, this is Michael Bogart, 21st Century Faith and AspectMinistries.com.
Right.
Check him out and get some of his books. When you do, send him a little note. Tell him you saw him right here on The Buzz. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Stick around.
All right.